You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today we are looking at some buy low players, guys, that you might be able to acquire in a trade on the cheap. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. And I'm recording this one a day in advance due to the New Year's Eve festivities. So I'm going out for New Year's Eve tonight and probably won't be home in time to record the little mini show. So getting it out for you guys early. So there is something for your own New Year's Eve enjoyment over in the States, or any of you guys in Australia waking up with a hangover on New Year's Day. You can just listen to my dulcet tones tell you about buy low players. And let's start with a bloke who's just come back from what must be the worst case of conjunctivitis ever, Marcus Smart of the Boston Celtics. Now, to be fair to Smart, it was a bad case of conjunctivitis, not your standard garden variety bacterial type. He had a viral conjunctivitis that was threatening his sight, but he is back in business now. But that one game that he played wasn't good. It was back to the old Marcus Smart, 2 of 9 shooting, 22% there, 7 points only, 23 minutes. He's a guy that's 102nd ranked player this season. Now, he doesn't fit every team. We're well aware of that. If he's dropped, I would look to see if it makes sense on my squad. He hasn't really been dropped in many leagues, but he is available in some formats. But his ability to get steals, to generate assists, and to generally be a better shooter than this. His reputation as a shooter is much worse than what he is as an actual shooter. He hits free throws normally at a pretty strong rate as well. Again, this is a one-game sample size we're looking at, but people do react really viscerally to Marcus Smart when he has a bad shooting night. They don't see the value in the assists and the steals and the high free throw percentage and the good three-point volume that he puts up. So he can be a guy that you might be able to get for your worst player on your team, and that can have some value in fantasy leagues, assuming it makes sense for your squad. Next guy I'll talk about is Mike Conley, who's currently out injured. I do believe that Conley will be better than what we've seen this season, and he'd bloody want to be, because he's the 171st ranked player over the course of the season. Now, he's not going to be out coming back and playing 34 minutes a night. He's not going to be averaging 25 points a night. I think that ship has sailed, but the shooting numbers should be improved from Conley. I think we get some better assist-type performances from him now, and just in general, he should be a more efficient player at some point of the season. But this is a real low point. Not only is he performing terribly, but he's out with his second hamstring injury. So you're not giving up a top 50 guy. You're not giving up a top 70 guy. In fact, I wouldn't even give up a top 100 player at this point to get Mike Conley. But I think he can get back to a top 100 level, and that's what buying low is all about. And then if he gets back even to like 80% of what he was in Memphis, then you're talking a top 60 sort of a guy, and that's a great return in investment. You're going to need a little bit of a buffer because he's injured, and we don't know exactly when he's coming back, probably a week or so away, but we don't know that for sure. So you're going to need a bit of a standings buffer, a roster buffer with no other injured type players on it, but now is a good time to do it because I do think in 3-4 weeks time he'll be putting up top 100 numbers, and your buy low window will have slammed shut for Mick. Bud Hield is on my list. He had a pretty good game yesterday, which was Sunday from when I'm recording this now. But the last few games from Bud haven't been kind. 218th over the last 2 weeks. Some pissy post-game comments as well. Not only did his usage and some of his assist and rebound numbers drop when De'Aaron Fox returned, but his shooting's been atrocious. 32% from the field over his last 7 games. 64% from the free throw line and just 29% from the three. And if we know Bud Hield, we know that he's going to be a better shooter than that. Now, people are really down on Hield, and all throughout this season, I've had people tell me they're considering dropping him. He's still the 61st ranked player this season. Like, that's not a droppable player under any circumstance. His value is heavily tied to points and threes, but normally he does that on high efficiency, which boosts his value up. He's giving you solid enough assists. The steals can wax and wane as to what he gives you there, but at this point, when people get really frustrated with him, especially when they see the post-game comments, "Who you're trash Hield, you shouldn't be on this team, shut your mouth and stop whining," like all that sort of thing comes out of people, and that's when you go, "Oh, you don't like Bud? I'll take him and I'll get him for a cheap price," because at some point this shooting is 100% going to come around. Now the numbers when Fox was playing are not as good as when Fox isn't playing. We're well aware of that. But he was putting up absolutely monster numbers, monster minutes, monster usage. So we're not looking at it from that perspective. He was a sell high back then. Fox came back, and there was a confluence of events. Not only did the usage drop down, but the shooting fell way off as well. And that's nothing to do with Fox. So that'll come back, and that'll give you a nice buy low, sell high type exchange on Bud Hield. I think it's also time we have to consider Ja Morant, a buy low player, struggling a little bit since returning from the back issue, 150th over the last 2 weeks, 14 points, 7 assists, 48% from the field. Look, they're not bad numbers, but he's had one steal over the last 8 games. And remember at 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think he was in the top 20 players and he was a sell high guy because he was averaging like 3 steals a game. And I said, well, this is not likely to continue. He's not a high steals guy. But this has swung so far in the other direction that it skewed his numbers significantly. He is 78th over the course of the season. He's still shooting on just 74% from the line over the last 8 games with a usage of only 22%. That usage number and the efficiency has dropped from Morant recently. That can all bump back up. If the steals just go back to, say, 0.8, 0.9, then you're talking about a significant jump up in his overall value. But it's really rough at the moment with no steals coming, low usage, minutes under 30, efficiency not where it was before, even though it's not bad. There is some buy low ability here on Ja. DeAndre Ayton, another player I've got on my buy low list. He looks like his return from that ankle injury is coming, but people really panic about him because they look at the one game and then he was suspended and then he comes back for one game and then he had the ankle injury. So people are just done. They're just frustrated. Now, he might come back and he might put up good numbers again. But I've seen some ludicrous type trade suggestions, including him, where people are valuing him as a top 50, a top 60 type player, when realistically you should be valuing him as a top 24 or a top 20 type of a guy. So while that might not seem like a big difference, a top 20 player versus a top 50 player is a significant difference. So if you can acquire him where the valuation on Aten is top 50, top 60, then you are winning. In fact, and I don't really worry about this ankle injury being a long-term thing. I don't worry about the suspension obviously being a long-term thing. So I think we're at a pretty low point in his value, and you should be able to get that back on him in a trade. I'm going to include Fanapants Kevin Huerter on my list here because I've been banging the drum on him, and people seem unconvinced. What does he do good, Josh? He's shit. Yeah, he's the 159th ranked player this season in 25 minutes a game. Now, unless more injuries strike Huerter, he won't be playing 25 minutes a game. He'll be playing 32, 33, 34 minutes a game. He's backup point guard. The shot hasn't fallen. There is going to be a stretch where he puts up top 70 value. It won't be sustained, but there is going to be that stretch. He can get assists. He can get some steals. He can hit some threes. He can score some points. The minutes are going to be up. And again, if he's on the waiver wire, you add him. But at some point, people are going, oh man, I picked him up and he's not doing anything. He's going through a little, the last couple of games haven't been good for him, but he's much better than that. And again, if you can be the 159th ranked player in 25 minutes, chuck another 8 minutes onto that, then I think you'll realize that you can be close to that top 100 mark where I think Huerter can be. So if you throw your worst player at him in a trade, you're probably going to be able to acquire him at this point. Toby Harris, a guy on my list who is not putting up the greatest numbers at the moment. Toby is the 96th ranked player over the last 2 weeks. He is shooting 19 points, scoring 19 points per game, but has not blocked a shot, has 0.7 steals, under 2.5 assists, and the 47 and 77% are fine as percentages, but they're not positives in fantasy. They're actually marginal negatives. So there's some significant room for Harris to improve, who is the 50th best player over the course of the season. I think he settles in that 50 to 60 type range for the rest of the year. But again, getting a 40-spot differential in a trade while a guy is slumping and while there's no defensive numbers there from Harris is probably worth doing when we can expect some improvement in those defensive stats. The assist numbers, even the rebound numbers are a little bit down from Toby Harris at the moment. Same thing from Kemba Walker, who is, he's been all over the shop this season, like top 5, top 80, and at the moment, over the last 2 weeks, he's 77th. He is the 27th ranked player over the course of the season. I think in that 27 to 35 is where I had him to begin the year, so he's sort of in that area. He's averaging over the last 6 games 20 points per game. That's good. We know that's good, but under 3 rebounds, under 5 assists, half a steal, 44% from the field. That is why he is down that low. Now, his assists had taken a leap up this season. I think we can expect that to bounce back up from that 4.7 he's at. The scoring can get a couple of extra points in there as well. The steals can come back up a little bit more. And he probably settles in that 25 to 35 type range for the rest of the season. But while he is in a little bit of a slump over these last 6 games, it is worth at least inquiring to see whether you can get him at a cheaper price. And the last guy I want to talk about might be a little bit hard to do, but Paul George is in a bit of a slump himself. at the moment. Over the last 2 weeks, he is the 55th ranked player in those 6 games that he's played. Nothing to do with minutes, 33 minutes a night, 21 points per game, but shooting just 39% from the field, including 36% from 3, but 40% from 2. We know Paul George is a better shooter than that. He's not the best field goal percentage guy, but he can be a 43, 44% guy. He can have 48, 49% stretches. His steal rate is down, 1.3 steals. This is a guy that can generate some big steal numbers. He's also averaging under 3 assists per game, and we saw early in his Clippers tenure that he was able to get some genuine playmaking roles happening. So 21 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists they're not bad numbers, but when you shoot 39% from the field and then you lack in some of those other categories compared to what you normally do, you are in a bit of a downswing. This is the 14th ranked player over the course of the season. That's the sort of value you should be ascribing to him going forward. And if you get him for a top 40 guy or top 30 guy or try and include him in a trade that gives you that bonus, this is the time to do it, because he, along with the whole Clippers team, is struggling with illness, and he's dropped back off in terms of his overall production. That'll do it for today's Buy Low podcast. I hope you guys all have a safe and happy New Year, or if you're in Australia, I hope you did have a safe and happy New Year's Eve celebration. Subscribe to this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.